So I saw Slash playing here in Nashville last night, and it was fantastic. But it really got me thinking, how does Slash do that, where he's playing all these crazy sounding licks, but they still kind of sound bluesy? But he's going way outside of the blues scales. He's not just using the typical running licks. He's all over the place. How does he do it? So I'm going to show you right now one of the secrets to being able to kind of play those fluid, really interesting, slippery sounding Slash style licks. Okay, so it all starts with a pentatonic scale, right? A lot of that playing style is very pentatonic based. So if you take the basic pentatonic scale, there's this little area in the pentatonic scale, which is a really easy fingering, right? I call that the box. It's this little shape right here. We're using your first and third fingers. And all we're going to do is we're going to add a chromatic note in between each one of those notes. So instead of just this box shape, we're going to add in, to kind of make a chromatic, right? Now, here's the scale now with that added in. Interesting sounding now, right? So what are those notes that we've actually added in? Well, the basic scale is root, minor third, fourth, fifth, and flat seven. Then it repeats. Root, minor third, fourth, fifth, flat seven. And what we're doing is we're adding in, that note is there's a flat five, which is the blue note, right? Which is a great note to add in. And then the next one on the next part of the little box shape here, the next one we're going to add in is in between these two notes we're adding this in this one, which is the major seventh. It's called the leading note, and it's the note right behind the octave. So that note, which Slash actually uses that note a lot, is the reason it's called the leading note is because it wants to resolve, it wants to kind of move to the octave, right? So that's a great note just to kind of throw in. You can always start a lick on the leading note. And then the last one, in between these two notes of the box on the third string, is this note right here. So that note is the major third. And the major third is crucial to the blues and rock music. And one of the characteristics of Slash's playing is this constant nomadic movement between the minor third and the major third. And that's part of the essential sound of rock music, is this kind of like, is it major, is it minor, or it's actually in between. And that's the sound of rock music. Okay, so we've got this scale now. I'm going to show you how it gets really interesting in a minute, but first of all, just with that scale, I mean, you can play some crazy Slash licks. You know, you can have fun, right, with it. But just even beyond that, just the idea that you've got these three notes that you can add in, all of a sudden it takes your basic pentatonic licks, and all of a sudden you've got these extra notes you can add in. So it starts getting more interesting already. But now what we're going to do is we're going to put these notes inside runs. Like so much pentatonic licks, they don't just stick exclusively inside those pentatonic boxes. They move in runs that actually go through several of the pentatonic scales. So one of the ones you'll see, there's tons of good lessons about this on the internet, but it's one of the licks that Slash uses a lot is this run here, which is like this, where you tie together three of the patterns of the pentatonic scale. So the run goes like this. Okay, so it's really easy to remember. Say we're in the key of A. There's your root note, and then you're going to actually start on your first finger, and then you're going to kind of walk up through this little box shape, and then slide. So you're just going to walk up through this little box, slide, then you jump up an octave and do exactly the same thing, and then you jump up another octave and do exactly the same thing again. So the whole run is very symmetrical. All right, so one of the interesting things about the pentatonic scale is you'll find this little box shape here. that you find in pattern 1, it's in all of the patterns. So in pattern 2, it's right here. In pattern 3, it's right here. In pattern 4. And then in pattern 5, it's right here. And then you run out of strings, so you have to drop down 2 octaves. But each time you play that box, it's the same notes, right? Or same notes, sometimes an octave apart. So right here, and then here, you can hear it's the same notes. So therefore, you can add those same chromatic steps in between each one of these box shapes. So in pattern 1, you got... In pattern 2, you got... So when you add those two together, you get this really interesting run now. It's kind of chromatic sounding, but because it's encased in the pentatonic scale, it doesn't really sound chromatic because your fingers are so used to kind of like emphasizing. You kind of know instinctively how to land on those notes even when you're using those chromaticisms. So you've got this cool run. Now, if you kind of finish that off going down into pattern 5, you'd have this little box shape here. So I'll go backwards. So now the whole thing would be like this. And that's basically this run here. But with an added chromatic note in between each one of the patterns. Now here's the secret though, because our fingers are so used to playing those runs, we're naturally going to kind of fall into those pentatonic notes, and we're just kind of placing those chromatic notes in between. So So then you can start to have all kinds of fun with it. So you can play it more tastefully, like just kind of sticking to your pentatonic scales, but throwing those notes in almost as color tones. Or you can play more slippery, crazy chromatic licks.